So tool number 7, take advantage of switching questions. See chapter 6, switching questions, page 73 to 90. For the ABCC formula, see chapter 7, seeing with new eyes, hearing with new ears, page 91 to 98. The purpose is to facilitate easier course corrections from the judger path onto the learner path. Discussion in chapter 6, Joseph introduces switching questions, a special kind of learner question that depends first on being able to observe judger. Ben learns to ask switching questions whenever he finds himself in judger. The choice map helps him remember this shortcut from judger back to learner. Think of switching questions as rescue, turnaround, or course correction questions. They can literally rescue you from judger consequences. Switching questions can give you not only the opportunity to choose a new course, but sometimes to make major breakthroughs. Just as with developing any other new ability, the more you use switching questions, the better you get at it and the more natural it feels. By their very nature, switching questions are from two questions, meaning they can carry us from judger to learner. We all use switching questions whether we realize it or not. The more aware we are of how they work, the more we are able to employ them on purpose. The best switching questions are those that feel most natural and accessible to you. These are the questions you most easily and consistently reach for and use. The more grooved in they are, the more effective they will be. The following list of switching questions include some contributed by participants in workshop over the years. So when you're doing the ABCC and you're talking about A, that is the awareness, the first question is, am I in judger? And these are the switching questions that you need to use. Is this what I need to feel? Is this what I want to be doing? Where would I rather be? How can I get there? Is this working? What are the facts? How else can I think about this? What assumptions am I making? What am I missing or avoiding? How can I be more objective and honest? What is the other person thinking, feeling, and wanting? What's surprising? Is this the hill I want to die on? What humor can I find in this situation? What's my choice right now? This is an evolving, growing list, and I encourage you to customize it by adding your own switching questions which work for you. So the practice is, think of past situations that were difficult or frustrating for you, but which you managed to turn around. Think about what was your switching question might have been in those situations. Why did they make a difference? When you discover the questions you asked intuitively, you will be able to use them more intentionally, skillfully, and quickly. And practice 2, the ABCC choice process. Pick a challenging situation in which you desire a change and follow the ABCC format described in Ben's story in chapter 7. So, chapter 8, learner teams and judger teams. During our break, I started remembering what it had been like to work at KB. It had been very different from what I was now experiencing at QTech. When I compare the two experiences, KB versus QTech, there wasn't a doubt in my mind that at KB, I had mostly been in learner. As a research engineer, I did most of my work alone, then reported my findings to the team, taking their questions and providing answers. It was easy to be a learner most of the time. By contrast, at QTech, it was apparent that I was in the judger more often than I cared to admit. No matter where I looked, especially with my team, something seemed to be going wrong. Somebody was falling to do what they were supposed to do. How could I avoid going into judger? As Joseph and I continued our meeting that day, I hesitantly shared this observation with him and told him, I am not sure where to take it from here. I think I can best respond to that with a story. Joseph replied, You've probably heard of the mythological Joseph Campbell. He was famous for coming up with exactly the right story for every situation. Here's one I heard many years ago. It seems a farmer was out working his field when his plow caught on something that wouldn't budge. His first reaction, of course, was to go into judger. Cursing, he began digging around to free the plow. To his surprise, it was caught on an iron ring buried deep in the ground. After freeing his plow, the farmer got furious and pulled on the iron ring. Off came the lid of an ancient chest. Before him, glittering in the sun, lay a treasure of precious jewels and gold. This story reminds us that it is often by confronting our toughest obstacles that we find our greater strength and possibilities. But sometimes we've got to dig deep to find them. Campbell had a phrase for it. When you stumble, there your treasure is. You'd ask yourself questions like, what could I discover? What might be valuable here? That might be fine and well, but I'm still not seeing how all this is going to help me. Where's the treasure in this mess of mine? When you stumble, there your treasure is. So we'll take some time talking about this particular aspect because in life, in general, there are no coincidences. Everything in your life happens for a reason. And when you stumble, you should actually take note of what is going on, why is this happening, so that you are able to dig deep and dig deep so that you can uncover that treasure which is there inside of you, because you will not stumble at all steps. There will be a particular thing that is happening, and it's very important and very interesting to note that becomes a pattern. It keeps on continuously repeating again and again, again and again. Why? That's the why we need to answer, because that has something for which we have to take that lesson in that. ऐसे ही नहीं वो चीज बार बार हो रही है. And you will not stumble on each and everything. You will not stumble on each and every relationship. You will not stumble upon in each and every situation or an event or a circumstances. But there will be a few ones. And where, with your self being consciously aware in the observer mode, you will be able to check, okay, this is where I'm stumbling. Now, what is it that I need to see? So once you go with that attitude, because 99% of the times when you stumble, you start criticizing. ऐसे कैसे मेरे साथ ऐसे कैसे हो रहा है, why is this happening to me, so you get into that very defensive judger mode. But the whole question is, if this is happening to you, there is a definite reason and there is a definite lesson. And the more you're open to learning that lesson, or the more you're open to these situations not bothering you much, and you're able to catch yourself there and then and get back into that learner mindset, you will be able to solve this puzzle. And it's very easy. All you have to do is just pick up a few signs here and there, and then absolutely everything starts to make sense. Joseph easily took up my challenge. How about doing a little excavating? He said. To start with, let's look at how your questions affect people around you. He leaned back in his chair, took a deep breath. Let's look at your team. How often are you in Judger when you meet with them? Truthfully, just about every minute meeting lately. And how would you say you communicate with the members of your team? Communicate? That's a laugh. Listen, I told you how awful our meetings are. When I do call a meeting, nobody has much to offer. They sit on their hands and wait for me to tell them what to do. Finally, I talk, and Charles barrages me with his interminable questions. Doesn't matter what I say, he questions everything. Think of yourself as the farmer in Campbell's story. Joseph continued, when you are with your team, are you cursing the fact that your plow got stuck? Or are you curious about finding the door to the treasure? Are you looking for who's to blame? Or are you looking for what's working? Are you asking yourself questions like, how can I show them I have the right answer? Or are you asking, what can we accomplish together? I wasn't sure what I did, but I knew it wasn't what Joseph was suggesting. I guess you'll have to clue me in here. Okay. You've been in conferences with Alaska. How does she conduct her meetings? What does she say and do? How do her meetings affect you? I look forward to Alexa's meetings, I told Joseph. They are always exciting. I come away with new ideas to pursue. I feel like charging back to my office to start acting on them, but I never could figure out what she does to generate that kind of excitement. The moment those words were out of my mouth, it hit me. Alexa, ask questions, I said. Her meetings are all about questions, but not interrogating kind of questions. She rarely pigs everyone's curiosity. Her questions motivate us, sometimes even inspire us. Joseph sat back in his chair a moment before leaning forward enthusiastically. Alexa's questions send you away wanting to contribute your best. She inspires people to abandon judger and operate from learner. She likes to say that learner begets learner and judger begets judger. You could even call Alexa a learner leader. Joseph paused for a moment and then asked, how do you think her her questions are different from yours? Learner begets learner and judger begets judger. So what do you mean when we talk about this sentence? A learner begets learner and a judger begets judger. So, it's about beget is an English word which means to bring about. So a learner brings about a learner and a judger brings about a judger. So when we are talking about an organization where you are probably in that leadership position where people are listening to you, people are looking up to you, your attitude at that top has a strong role, has a very strong role to play in how is it that they are going to perform. So the learner in you, when you're in that learner mindset, it is going to bring about the learner in others. But if it's You are coming from that space of a judger mindset, it's going to bring everybody into a judger mentality. So it's very important to check where are you operating from, especially when you're conducting meetings with your team members or with your key criteria persons, or when it's a very important relationship in your life. It's always important to check, because whatever is it that you're approaching that situation, event, circumstance, or relationship with, that's the mindset that's going to hit the other person. So if I'm approaching a relationship or a meeting or an event with a judger mindset, strong chances the other is also going to be in that judger phase or that judger mindset. But if I'm able to check myself and get myself using switching questions, using other questions to be on the learner mindset, strong chances that the other person would also be on that frequency of being on a learner's mindset. Alexa has a style, I have mine, I said, getting a little defensive. Do you ask questions? Sure, I ask questions. I ask my people what they've accomplished since our previous meetings or what they haven't, which is more accurate lately. When they answer, how do you listen? How do you respond? It depends. If the answer is any good, I might jot it down, but lately I leave those meetings with a blank pad. Describe what's the experience of listening is like for you, Joseph said. That wasn't difficult. Mostly, I've been pretty annoyed and impatient, I replied, especially when a person's answer doesn't come close to solving the problem, or when it shows they are not following my plan. I get the impression nobody really cares. In situations like those, what's your attitude towards your colleague? Are you a learner or judger most of the time? What else? Judger, of course, but nobody's contributing a damn thing. If they would only. Joseph held up his hand. Ooh, hold on, my friend. When you are with your team, it sounds like you're listening with judger questions like, are they going to screw up again? And how are they going to disappoint me this time? Sure, those sound like my question based on my experience with them. What else would I be asking? I suddenly stopped. Boy, I just stubbed my toe on the iron ring in the story you just told me, didn't I? You sure did. Good observation. And like the farmer, your first reaction was to go judger, which is natural enough. Joseph said, now do what the farmer did after that. Get curious. Ask yourself, what's happening here? Think about your team. And this time, follow the learner's path. Follow the learner's path with my team. You've got to be kidding, I said. Besides, how would I do that? For starters, reset yourself in learner mindset before you meet with your team. Try the kind of questions Aleska asks, like, what do I appreciate about them? What are the best strengths of each one of them? How can I help them collaborate most productively? And how can we stay on the learner path together? I'll bet you can see how those learner questions would change everything in a meeting. Alexa's questions create a learner environment. They invite everyone, including you, to listen more patiently and carefully. With learners' questions, we listen in order to understand the other person rather than to find out who's right or wrong. I repeat, this is a very powerful line. With learner questions, we listen in order to understand the other person rather than to find out who's right or wrong. That makes it possible for everyone to get curious, feel safe taking risks, and participate fully, even when they're facing tough challenges. It's the tough challenges part that gets me in trouble, I argued, We've got some big problems and nobody is willing to speak up, much less take them on. Plus, there are so many major decisions we disagree on. We just can't seem to get through the conflicts to the other side. That's when I get frustrated and start feeling like nothing is ever going to work out. I think myself right down into the judger pit. Even though you'll never be pure learner, including with your team, you can learn to choose where you put your attention moment to moment. Any attention you give to judger isn't available to give to learner, except judger. Practice learner. Imprint that slogan on your brain. It's as important for teams as it is for individuals. Any attention you give to judger isn't available to give to learner. So what's more important is we need to, before, it's very important to approach that situation, event, circumstance, meeting, or when you're approaching that relationship, is to work on your own mindset first. For example, if you're going to meet some person randomly, or it's an important relationship and you're going to meet the person at 7 o'clock when he comes back, or whatever, whenever is it, before that you can spend 5 minutes with yourself by asking these questions. What is it that I appreciate about him or her, and what are the best strengths in each one of us? Or when you're approaching a team meeting, what is the best strength in each one of them, and how can I help the other person or the team collaborate more productively, and how can we, or the relation or the situation or the meeting and the group of people, stay on the learner path together. Because जब आपने वो mind को ये 4 question से intention दे दी है that yes, I'm going to be on the learner's path, and mind works fantastically well with intentions. That's the beauty of it. Because अगर वो हमने intention दी है before the thing, before the meeting with the person in relationship, or a meeting with your team members, or a meeting with your staff members, if that intention is rightly given to my mind before the event, chances are that me as an individual would be more bent over towards the learner mindset rather than getting into that judger mindset. Because at the end of the day, wherever you give your energy to or attention to, that grows. So अगर आपने एक मीटिंग से पहले ही इंटेंशन सेट कर दी है of asking these learner questions, you've given an intention about it to your mind. So you've given a direction of giving your energies and your attention towards being on the learner's path for yourself as well as for others. Because अगर वही attention हमने जजर mindset को दे दी है before the situation, before the event, that is now not available to give to the learner. और अगर वो attention और energy जजर को दे दी है, so we have deep down silently empowered that judger inside of us. So it's very important, before any important event, meeting, situation in a relationship or at work, fix your mindset first before approaching things, and ask these learner questions, so that with that intention, when you approach that actual meeting with the person or your team, your intention is working, because that is where you've given your energies, and wherever you give your energies and attention to, that will eventually grow. Because अगर हमने वो जजर को attention और energy दे दी, तो वो जजर grow करेगा. Very clear and simple. It'll be more difficult for us to switch back to the learner. बट अगर हमने उससे पहले ही लर्नर को वो एनर्जीज और अटेंशन दे दी है, तो वी आर फीडिंग दैट लर्नर, दैट विल ग्रो. Because any attention you give to judger will not be available to give to the learner. So that decision, that choice before the event for your highest and best interest has to be intended by you in terms of these learner questions. That's why Alexa's meetings are so great. I reflected. There are learner environments, like you say. I always have the sense that we have her full attention and that she really cares about what we have to say. If she ever goes judger, I'm sure it's just for a fleeting visit. I had a sudden insight. All she asks are learner questions and lots of them. Plus, I'll bet she gets an almost perfect score on the rule you told me about. You know, much more asking, much less telling. That's why she's called the inquiring leader, isn't it? Accept the judger and practice learner. It is as important for teams as individuals. That's it, Joseph said. Alexa genuinely cares about what people have to say. Not only does she ask learner questions, she also listens with learners' ears. Alexa's listening is focused by questions such as, what's valuable here? What's to be learned from that comment? How can this contribute to what we are working on? The questions she listens with help her teams turn into learner teams very quickly. She accepts to find the treasure, she looks for it, and much of the time she finds it. So it's very important whenever you are listening to somebody, because this is where a lot of us do not get into that mode of active being an active empathetic listener, is because majority of the times, okay, I'm not saying all the time, but majority of the times we are only listening to find the fault, and जैसे ही हमें वो fault मिल गई है, हमने वो fault अपने mind में store कर ली है कि जैसे ही ये बंद होगा, जैसे ही ये चुप करेगा, my reply is ready. और उस दौरान जब तक वो बोल रहा है और आपको आपका वो कीवर्ड मिल गया जिस पे आपने रिप्लाई देना है, वॉट एवर द अदर पर्सन इज सेइंग, वी आर नॉट बॉदर्ड, वी आर नॉट लिसनिंग, बिकॉज हमने अपनी लिसनिंग लिमिटेड की हुई है टू फाइंड दैट फॉल्ट or to get that reply to give any stops. Whereas when you talk about being a true empathetic listener, is to listen what's there, what is he trying to say, what is it that can add value to whatever we are working on. Is it work, relationship, anything? So rather than approach that listening with the perspective of finding that fault, making your reply in your mind, and now just waiting for the other person to stop, is to actually just listen, absorb what the other person is saying, and do not concentrate what you need to reply, because then that reply becomes a reaction. That's not a response. And an true empathetical listener will always listen for the sake of listening, understanding, making sense, then absorbing, assimilating that information, and then responding with what he or she feels. पहले ही नहीं आंसर बना लेना है. It happens majority of the times. The choice map can help you do this with your team too. Look at it again. So far, we've been thinking about it as a guide for how an individual thinks, behaves, and relates. Now, let's consider it as a guide for teams. Start thinking in terms of learner teams and judger teams. I think of learner teams as being typically high performing and judger teams as being typically low performing. When researchers explored what distinguished high performing teams with low performing ones, Can you guess what they found? Part of me didn't even want to know. Another part was intrigued, but I decided not to guess. No, what? I replied. First of all, the high performing teams had more positive emotions than low performing teams. That's not a big surprise, but what I found revealing was the low performing teams were low on inquiry, that is, on asking questions, and high on advocacy, that is, pushing a particular viewpoint rather than listening to anybody else. Becomes a closed thinking. So, the bottom line I said is if you want high performance, focus on learner. Yes, Joseph said, but there's more. The research also showed that high performing teams consistently had a good balance between inquiry and advocacy. That has to have been learner inquiry and learner advocacy. It means that people feel free to ask tough questions and have genuine open debate. They can even argue and have conflicts, yet the atmosphere remains learner. That's exactly what happens with Alexa's meetings, I said. This is great. It's what Alexa calls a learner alliance, Joseph said. It's when team members work together to stay on the learner's path. That's completely opposite of what happens when members of a team go judger. They would end up in what I call a judger standoff. Everyone just defends their own position and doesn't listen to any other ideas. Nothing gets done, and everyone blames someone else. That's the real cost of judger when it takes over a team. So, learner alliances, when team members work together to stay on the learner's path, and it actually starts with you, whoever is the leader. When I pictured the choice map, I could clearly imagine Alexa's whole team jogging happily along the learner path, set off on their journey with learner questions. Their attention was free to focus on new solutions and possibilities. Alexa's team would certainly qualify as a high performing one, and my team, most of my people were down at the bottom of the map, mired in the mud of the judges' pit, and I had put them there. I hate to admit this, but accepting it was the only way I'd ever get them out. I'm just the opposite of Alexa, I mumbled. She seems to create a balanced learner environment almost automatically. She wasn't always that way, like most of us, Joseph noted. She was automatically more judger to start with. It usually takes effort and intention to turn the tide and become more naturally learner. I repeat, very powerful line once again. It usually takes effort and intention to turn the tide and become more naturally learner. Think about it as deliberately training your brain to do the things it doesn't automatically know how to do. Like anything, learning to drive a car or operating a computer or learning to ride a bike, it requires close attention at first, but soon becomes second nature. This is a lot to take in, I said. When I first walked into your office, truthfully, I was just looking for a quick fix. What you are offering is obviously a lot bigger. Joseph nodded. Couldn't you narrow it down to a few words of advice? I joked. How often do people really take advice? He was right, of course. I guess I'm an expert at not taking advice. I grinned at my sudden insight. Aren't we all? Joseph replied. Even though it's hard to resist, I try to avoid giving advice. I know that if I ask good questions, people are smart enough to come up with their own best answers. Your own advice is the only kind most of us listen to and act on anyway. But I do have a suggestion for you. Ben Joseph flashed his signature mischievous grin. Do you want to hear it? Sure, I said, and we both laughed. Alexa is a great model for what you and I are working on. She personally went through a lot of similar things as you to accomplish what she has. Next time you meet with Alexa, ask her to tell you about that. I'm sure she'd be happy to. Good suggestion, I thought. Then I asked Joseph if there were any other things I should bring up with Alexa. Joseph nodded. There is something else. Alexa came up with this terrific question thinking practice, which she calls Q storming. Question storming. It's sort of like brainstorming, except that you're looking for new questions instead of answers and ideas. Ask her to explain Q storming to you. There's also a tool about it in your workbook. Alexa credits it with being the catalyst for most of her most important breakthroughs. Now that sounded really intriguing and promising. That's where we ended our conversation that day. Down on the streets, a few minutes later, I cut through the park across from the Pearl building into an open playing field when an older boy was helping a younger one learn to ride his bicycle. I stopped to watch. In spite of spills and near falls, they were having fun. There were shouts of encouragement along with cries of despair as the younger boy made yet another mistake and tumbled to the ground. Each time the younger boy fell, the older one rushed to his side to give assistance and support to try again. Finally, the younger boy caught on. He rode off, covering 50 feet or so, with the older boy chasing after him, whooping and holding cries of victory. I caught myself thinking, why are adults so damn competitive? Why are they so uncooperative? Always looking for ways to show up the other guy. Why did I have to put up with people like Charles? I was getting angry. I turned around to catch one last glimpse of the kids before getting into my car. Now the two of them were standing beside the upright bike, laughing together. I reached for the ignition and thought, wouldn't it be amazing if our teams could work together just like those kids? I wonder what I would take that to make that happen. That moment, I realized I had done something that was still quite new for me. I had transformed judger questions into learner ones. Not bad. I thought I couldn't wait to share this with Joseph. That's when it occurred to me that maybe I really could follow Alexa's example. Turn my team into a learner's team by becoming a learner leader. The inquiring coach, as Alexa called Joseph, was really on to something. I wanted to find out what else Joseph had up his sleeves. I was beginning to feel real hope that maybe it wasn't too late to salvage my career.